Is Julian Sayin the biggest unknown heading into the 2025 college football offseason? I think he is, and there's some complicating factors here. What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. If this is your first time watching the #1 college football show, welcome. We talk college football 24/7 around here, 365 days a year. We love it. If you like the show, subscribe, hit the like button, and answer the question below. Who is the biggest unknown player who has the most to say about the 2025 season to you? I think it's Julian Sayin at Ohio State because he is the presumptive #1 right now. He came over last year after being the best quarterback in the 2024 class and a top 10 recruit at that, right? The way that I look at this is, did he get to throw passes to Jeremiah Smith before all this started to go down in the 2024 season? Probably not. But it doesn't hurt that they are in the same class. It's also a man that was never supposed to be at Ohio State. Coming out of Carlsbad, all he wanted to do was go play for Nick Saban. That's it. That's what he wanted to do. And there was a time in the 2023 season when Nick Saban had said, I would have loved to have Julian Sayin come in to play football against Texas right as Jalen Milroe was throwing the football to the other team and ended up losing that game in Tuscaloosa. And Miss Terry Saban, Nick Saban's wife, had told Julian and his family as much. That's how close they were. So when he decided to retire, all the dominoes fell. Right? And this was also at a time when Bill O'Brien had just become the new offensive coordinator at Ohio State. Having been an offensive coordinator at Alabama and helped recruit Julian Sayin on the strength of what Bryce Young was doing to Alabama. It felt like it was going to be a match. And then Bill O'Brien became the second guy to leave Julian Sayin in the lurch, going to be the next head coach at Boston College, where you can understand Julian Sayin would not want to go. So he transfers from Alabama to Ohio State, and he's sitting behind a grad transfer in Will Howard, along with another talented true freshman in Aaron Nolan, and now what is a third-year player in quarterback Lincoln Kienholz. Now, going into this 2025, we know that there have been a lot of changes to Ohio State's coaching staff already, right? Starting with offensive coordinator Brian Hartline succeeding Chip Kelly. You know Matt Patricia is the new defensive coordinator after Jim Knowles goes to Penn State. You know that after Justin Fry goes to Arizona Cardinals, you have Tyler Bowen, former offensive coordinator at Va-Tech and Penn State, coaching offensive line now at Ohio State. You know that Billy Fessler's the new quarterback's coach. And on it goes. The $12.5 million extension for 7 years annual for Ryan Day. All of this is coming back to who's going to be the starting quarterback, as Brian Hartline is going to be the guy with the play card calling plays. So it's going to have to be a really good quarterback. And because it's Brian Hartline, who has not had a hand in picking the quarterback like he will now, because it's Billy Fessler who's going to be in that room, you also have to take into account Tavien St. Clair, 6'4", a top 10 recruit in the 2025 class, one of the best players in this class, who has an opportunity to show up as a true freshman and also take that spot. He's not as big an unknown to me because so much is riding on Julian Sayin and what he was able to do and bridge, right, that year as the backup on the team to Tavien St. Clair just showing up right now with a new offensive coordinator, right, new scheme. But that usually resets the board for the talented players because are they going to run the same offense? I think so. But maybe with a new set of eyes, Brian Hartline is willing to go. Tavien St. Clair, Lincoln Kienholz, show me something. I'm still not sold on the Lincoln Kienholz stuff. He came in the Missouri game. I was unimpressed. Some of y'all have been like, hey, don't completely write the dude off. I'm going, Julian Sayin was right there. And if Aaron Nolan think he got a transfer, what you think Lincoln Kienholz is doing? Aaron Nolan wins at South Carolina. I think Aaron Nolan was one of the better quarterbacks out of his class, period. And if I rate him, I rated Aaron Nolan ahead of Julian Sayin. But that's me because I watched him at Langston Hughes, and that dude can spin it. You also had quite a connection between him and Jelani, because that tight end position is going to be a lot of fun with Max Clair being there. Another guy that got a promotion, Keenan Bailey, tight ends coach, co-offense coordinator now. You're going to be able to use different aspects of this, and then Carlos Loughlin is going to have to get you a new bell cow and spellback in what we think is James People, and then perhaps C.J. Donaldson. It's going to be new, right? A lot of pieces are going to change. They lost 15 guys that they know are going to the NFL combine, right? Could have 15 guys drafted. Who knows? Lost on their offensive line, but they're replacing it with some really great veterans that they picked up through the portal. I think if Julian Sayin is as good as we think he can be, he ought to be able to compete with the likes of Arch Manning, with the likes of Gunnar Stockton, with the likes of Dante Moore at Oregon, and on down the line. I already think that Julian Sayin is probably a better quarterback than Drew Aller, but that's not saying much for me. I think Drew Aller is the weakest part of the Penn State program. That's a high floor. It's the kind of floor that gets you within a field goal to beat Notre Dame playing for the national championship. It's also the guy that throws the interception that seals the game for Notre Dame to play in the national championship. Be better than that, right? You also got to take into account that Tavien St. Clair might actually have something that we haven't seen yet. And we won't know this until they get to spring ball, whatever that looks like, because many college football programs are thinking about going to an OTA style, which means that we don't have the traditional spring practices that we are associated. 15 spring practices at this time, culminating in a spring football game, feels like something that was 20 years ago a very big deal. Now we may not ever see it again by nature of name, image, and likeness, the longer season, a lot of contributing factors to this, but essentially the football that is played in the fall has become so terribly important to the bottom line of universities and their programs that you're not willing to risk injury, number one, and then losing players to the portal because they had a really great spring performance on television, which is a thing that Nebraska head coach Matt Rule cited. And that's huge because Nebraska's spring football game is a tremendously big deal. I argue that it is the most important spring game annually, every single year, because they routinely get 60, 70, 80,000 people in that thing, whether or not the team's any good. Like, that's remarkable that Nebraska can outdraw Michigan after Michigan wins the national championship in a spring game that was on Fox is wild, right? But that's what Nebraska is, and that's how terrified Matt Rule is of, say, putting out Rocco Spindler, guy that he got out of Notre Dame to come play offensive line in Nebraska, and showing what he can do, among others, right? It's usually the skill guys that get the most pop out of these things because that's how we watch the ball, right? They watch the film. But maybe somebody is watching the film on the Big Ten Network and decides, hey, I kind of like that offensive lineman. I wonder if we can get him in the portal. Julian Sayin is also going to tell us a lot about what we can expect from Tavien St. Clair, right? Is he willing to sit behind him a year? I think so. Devin Brown choosing to transfer to Cal also signals that Tavien and Julian Sayin are in that spot. It's interesting, to say the least. I also want to take it back to who is he going to get compared to? That's why it's an unknown. The last number one overall recruit we had at quarterback, 247 composite, is the starting quarterback at Texas. It's Arch Manning. Since then, we're talking about wideouts and cornerbacks being the backbone of what high school has been giving us. Ryan Williams being one, Jeremiah Smith being that guy that everybody's going to talk about. And as you continue to compare, you get to know, oh, yeah, okay, so Arch Manning and Dante Moore, those are two dudes that should be playing against each other. And I sincerely hope we get to see Oregon and Texas in a college football playoff game because that would be fantastic. Get to see Will Stein, who is a Texas dude who came up throwing passes in Texas, played a little quarterback at Louisville, went to work at UTSA, and then took the jump over to Oregon. Being able to bring that Duck team to Austin would just be outstanding. Dan Lanning back in the SEC. Be great. I would love that. There's a lot of other things that I think could happen when we got one, right? Ohio State Notre Dame on paper is one of the great games that anybody expects to see because of what the programs mean to each other. You also are comparing him to other new starters. So we think that Bryce Underwood might sit behind Mikey Keene, but it's not a guarantee. I would expect to see Bryce Underwood playing. Another guy that we expect to see playing as a true freshman would be C.J. Carr at Notre Dame. You're asking a lot of that dude to step into what Riley Leonard is leaving, a team that played for the national championship, a team that won a record amount of games, and a team that ended up getting beat by Ohio State, but beat a lot of good football teams to get there, including Indiana, whose only losses were to Notre Dame and Ohio State, who played for the national championship, Georgia, who won 2 of the last 3 national championships before Ohio State won this one, Penn State, who played in the Big Ten championship game, which is something that neither Michigan nor Ohio State nor Indiana did, and then the Buckeyes, who needed to run through the hard way, right? Tennessee, my goodness, man. Texas, goodness, Oregon, and then Notre Dame. I'm inclined to believe that Tavien St. Clair can make this a competition that we are talking about in August. I also am inclined to believe that Julian Sayin is the guy. Usually what happens is the guy that doesn't throw the football to the other team the most in practice usually ends up getting the job to start. And then it becomes, how do you perform in games? And if they think they can make a leap, they will. Because the job in 2025, I believe, starting with your August 31st game against Texas, is to make sure that everybody knows that Jeremiah Smith is still that guy and force your defenses to take him away. And then see if you can let Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis, Mylan Graham eat. That's going to be it. C.J. Donaldson, I think, is going to be your bell cow in that if that dude can run as hard as Quinshon Judkins can run, it's going to be great. James Peoples got that kind of ability, though, so I'm not counting him out. And then what your offensive line is going to do. I think they're in a good spot here. But it is quite dependent on what Julian Sayin is or isn't. And if he isn't, what is Tavien St. Clair? Then it's all over but the crime.